1/3 of the entire Quran is made up of stories. Stories of prophets, stories of peoples before us, stories of civilizations, empires, rise and falls. Beautiful stories. About 1/3, so it's something to reflect on. That's a good percentage of the Quran. And we know that stories are impactful because people of all ages and people of all times, across cultures, people are impacted and moved by inspirational stories, right? The rise and the fall, the plots and the plot twists, right? Whether it's drama, whether it's a movie, because really what a film is, it's just a story. It's a modern age story. Whether it's poetry. History is very critical and stories are very important. So what's your story? Some of the most beautiful stories in the Quran, and in fact Allah says the most beautiful story ever told, or the greatest story ever told, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And these are the stories that we tell you here in the Quran. Allah is saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the greatest stories ever told. Interestingly, the language used means even fiction stories, right? Stories with dragons and all that, that still falls under a story. Allah didn't say this is the greatest non-fiction story ever told. He said, we're about to tell you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the greatest stories ever told. Which means you should be able to take the story of Yusuf alayhi salam as an example and run it against all the greatest stories ever told, the greatest movies, the biggest hits, right? The books, the novels that get sold out, the best sellers. And you should find that it is more exciting, it's more interesting, and it follows an even better. I apologize. It follows an even better plot, right? Shakespeare and others were known for having the best rise and fall and the best action, the best climaxes in their stories. Yusuf alayhi salam's story is one of a kid, innocent kid, good relationship with their father. You wouldn't expect anything to go bad in this person's life. 10 brothers, or 11 brothers, but 10 that are much bigger and stronger and so on. Basically his own tribe, his own protection. You think that this guy's life is made for him. And his dad is a prophet, wise and all that. Like his mom and dad love him. It's like a perfectly good story to, happily ever after. Not much drama. But it does start with drama as soon as he's around 10 years old when his 10 brothers and sisters, 10 brothers, I keep saying brothers and sisters, 10 brothers threw him into a well. And actually the commentary, it's not in the Quran, but the commentary of the Mufassirun, the commentators like the Sahaba and so on, said that the Prophet told them that in fact, at one point he's in the well, he starts calling out all their names one by one. This is his brothers. Like, Ahmad, how could you leave me in here? Muhammad, how can you do this to me? Salah, how did you do like that? All of them one by one. Imagine how cold-hearted they had to have been to walk away, throwing their youngest in the well, knowing that he might or might not survive. But they did that. And it only gets worse and worse in a sense, right? Both in that story of the well and also the rest of his life. Because we know that like a decade or 20, maybe 20, 30 years later, they're fully grown adults at that time. They still see that their dad is still sad about what happened, naturally. A parent won't forget that they lost a kid. But they tell their dad, like, you're still sad about that? Dude, get over it. What's wrong with you? Think about how insane that you gotta be to tell your dad to get over the fact that you killed, or at least, got things going in the direction of murder. Set him up into a position where he's in danger. How crazy you have to be to tell your dad to get over it. But that's what it was, right? And along those years, they went their own way and the family did what they did. This person would end up being sold into slavery, which people didn't really expect to happen once he threw him into a well. They thought die, starvation. Thrown into slavery, but in the hands of a good family, or at least a good father in his figure, and a crooked mother, an evil mother with evil intentions. But anyway, kind of a plot twist. Usually it's we know about the patriarchy and the evil man and the society built on. But it was a benevolent, just, wise father, and a woman that had probably done similar things to servants in the past. That's how the story goes. But anyway, it's interesting. He ends up in prison, which you wouldn't expect when you're literally the prince living with the king. So the story keeps getting more and more interesting. In prison for years, forgotten when we thought that he'd be remembered by the person who came out after he had helped him, thinking that he's finally going to get a break. Ends up in prison. He's a prophet. He's in prison. He's giving people da'wah while he's in prison. It's just crazy. Comes out of prison and then becomes a minister. Like, who comes out of prison and even gets a job, Anyway, that's one of the many stories Allah tells in the Quran. It's the greatest stories ever told. Another story is David and Goliath. Across cultures, across languages, across countries, today everybody knows the story of David and Goliath. And everyone likes to see in their life story that they are the David versus Goliath. Regardless of what industry they're in, what frame, what career, what field, what odds they're going up against, what challenges, everyone would like to think that they are David going up against Goliath. Right? And another story that's beautiful is Moses and the Pharaoh. Right? Moses goes up against the Pharaoh of his time, and every time since these last 3,000 years, people have tried to use that analogy to make parallels to their times. Right? The President of the United States is the Pharaoh of our times. The king, prime minister, president of whatever country, the Pharaoh of our times. Right? A really powerful gang or political party, they're the Pharaoh of our times. Right? Mass incarceration and police brutality and this and that, it's the Pharaoh mindset. We're dealing with the Pharaoh mindset. Young boys being killed. Remember the story of Musa alayhi salam? He was the one who survived, but the generation he was living in, the boys were being slaughtered. The women were left to basically run their own families and all that. People make analogies of that to modern US society today. But anyway, most of us are kind of protected in the suburbs. We don't really see all that stuff, but it's a reality. So I picked 3 stories out of many. Trying my best to just highlight some of the many lessons that can be learned from those stories, the many beautiful twists in the stories. But notice that those 3 stories are not solely within the Islamic tradition. They're stories that we know, we've grown up listening to. But Christians and Jews know those stories very well, and so do people that have no faith at all. Everyone knows these stories. That tells you how impactful stories can be. So what's your story going to be? I alluded to the fact that a movie, and I guess we pretty much all watch movies, at least some genre or another. Every movie is really just a story being told, right? So the Hollywoods of today, right, the movie industries, the media companies, and the Harvards, right, the higher education, the institutions, the intellectual elites, both of them use stories, right? When you take courses, you pick a specific major, you're taking a course with a professor, what they're doing is taking you through a story of how they see the world and why the evidence should line up so that you come to the same conclusion. A Hollywood movie telling you this is how life should be, or how life can be, or how life was for a certain person. All stories. So what's your story going to be? So I started with the Quran, right? Stories that Allah wrote himself. But we also know that Allah chose a set number of stories, each one with a specific purpose and a specific lesson to teach us our purpose in life. That's what the Quran is about, right? It's not a book of history or a book of science, although we like to claim that. It's a book of guidance. It's a book of signs. Teach us how to live right and wrong. But he chose a few stories, but really, if you think about it, every human being to have ever lived has a story, and those are all Allah's stories, because Allah created every single one of us, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but Allah does. So those are His stories. He wrote out all of human history with all its ups and downs. That's all one big story. Just a way to think about it. So the story of U.S. history, right, which interestingly started exactly 400 years ago in a sense. 1619 was the beginning of when Africans were first forced into slavery and brought to what is now the U.S. I don't know if you're learning that in school, but it's something I think that should be taught in schools across the world, yeah? Or at least in America. 400 years ago, the first group of people were forced into slavery, brought to what is now the U.S. Right? It's 400 years, that's like 150 years before the U.S. was even a country. And those people and their ancestors were in fact the ones who built up the country. Again, not exactly what we learned in school. So attempted genocide, if not complete genocide against the Native Americans, or the indigenous peoples. And then the greatest country, the most powerful, the richest country in the world, or one of the most, built up by slaves and their descendants, right? Which are obviously not the ones who are writing the books, telling the courses, teaching the history for the most part. And in that story, 400 years, there's many amazing stories within that. And obviously, the Khutbah isn't long enough, but just a few, for those who've never heard this. There were some of those slaves, I forgot to say, a third or a fourth, a good sizable fraction of those who were forced into slavery from Northwest Africa were Muslim, right? A fraction of them are Christian, a fraction of them are pagan or polytheistic, some tribal religions. I'm sure some of them had no faith, but some of them were Muslim, actually a good sizable percentage. And from them, some of them were scholars. Now that's incredible, because you're a slave in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, whatever it is, somewhere in America. I guess Florida wasn't one of the original colonies, but anyway. You're a slave and you're in the plantations, and you're basically, you know that you and your descendants and descendants are going to be forced into this type of work. It's not even work. And your landowners are going to live the life that they live. But some of those landowners couldn't even read and write. And some of these people were scholars, knowing multiple languages and could read and write. And some of them wrote the entire Quran from memory. I don't know if you've ever heard that. The first time I ever heard that, honestly, I can't describe to you the words of how I felt when I read that. I was like, that is amazing. Can't believe I never heard this. And I heard it for the first time just a couple years ago. Imagine writing the whole Quran from memory in Arabic. And these were people that were scholars in different madhabs, different schools of thought and within the Islamic traditions. These were, scholars. And some of their landowners, like I said, couldn't read and write, so that made an interesting dynamic, because part of the justification, and there is no justification for slavery, part of the justification was, our skin color is different, we're greater than you, we're superior than you, we're better than you, we're more civilized than you, we got Christianity and you don't, if they don't, or you don't understand Christianity the way we do, or we're educated and you're not. That's a theme throughout human history till today, never gets old, right? We're here to educate you, to free you, to liberate you. But some of them were more educated than their slave masters. Anyway, that's just one story, or one chapter in the story, and it only gets better. It's beautiful all the way through. Amazing stories that make up one beautiful story that is the history of the U.S. that I would like to argue isn't being taught properly, neither in the media nor in the schooling system. Although I see that Shadow Creek has made has surprised me in a certain positive way. So alhamdulillah, not in the media, not from our parents, and not from the schooling system. So it's a project that I'm undertaking. But I'll leave it at that. You all know the story of Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, and all that. So that's like 350 years after the beginning of the story. That's just one of the chapters, and we're living through another chapter. So what's your story going to be? Know that you're not going to live to 1 million, and neither am I, right? And chances are you're not even going to live to 100. That's just the reality. Statistically, let's say 75. That means I'm 25 right now. I'm about a third of the way through, and only Allah knows, but possibly even more than that. So in that short life that we have, in that short window of even if it's 100 years, the message is to live a purposeful life. Put Allah first. Try to have meaning in your life. Right? Be dutiful to your parents. Don't fall for the distractions, right? Don't be obsessed with the praise and the criticism too much. right? Because everyone else is also on their journey trying to live themselves, and everybody has the picture. They have just a pixel. Take care of your spiritual health, your physical health, and your mental health, right? Don't fall for the traps, don't get distracted. Be very purposeful in how you make your friends and choose your mentors wisely. Educate yourself, as they say, stay woke. Care about what's going on around you, it's not all about yourself, right? And I know it's audacious and maybe to some annoying, and to others unrealistic, overly optimistic, but I really do believe that you can change the world. So I encourage you to do so. Your story isn't fully written yet, you're still alive. So I'm gonna ask you again, what's your story gonna be?